Cloth tearing is difficult to set up in Blender, but the Simply Tear Pro add-on makes achieving effects like these easy. So in this video, I'll show you how to use the add-on from the basics to more advanced examples. Simply Tear is an affordable add-on on SuperHive, and when I release this video, it will be discounted along with thousands of other products as part of a side-wide sale. You'll need the Pro version for the dynamic tearing effects I'll cover in this video. You'll find a link in the description box below. Let's quickly go through the basics. Once you install the add-on, it will be available in the end panel under Simply Add-ons, and you can create an object that you want to be your cloth. And you can subdivide it using the subdivide button. Click the fast cloth button, and this object is set to be cloth now. We can go to pin, select the vertices that we want to pin, and click pin it. Now we have pinned vertices. Then we can go to draw tear line and just draw lines where we want some tearing. I'll choose the rough preset because it gives more interesting results and click finish. You'll see the tearing already happening, and if I press play, the torn cloth will be simulated. What we saw so far is the kind of tearing that you can do with the light version of the add-on. Next, we'll go into the Pro features. So again, to keep it simple, I'll start over, create a simple plane, subdivide it. And now for the more dynamic type of tearing, do not use fast cloth. That is what confused me at first. Instead, enable random tear, for example. We'll cover dynamic later, but for now let's choose random and then click apply. Under random settings, you can click preview, and that will show where you'll be able to tear this cloth. You can play with the seed to find another variation and change the number of pieces of cloth that you want. And the cool thing is, once we disable preview, the cloth will look perfect. You won't see any seams or anything like that. Next, we're going to do some pinning again. And I'm going to pin the whole border of the mesh. Now, if we play the animation, it will start simulating. And now to actually tear it, we need an activator. I'm going to enable a dummy activator, and that will give me this spherical empty with dynamic paint and collision, which is necessary for the tearing effect. Now, if I play the animation and move the empty near the cloth, I'll start tearing it dynamically. By default, collision will be enabled, which means that this sphere here will tear the cloth and it will also interact. It will collide with the cloth mesh. If you only want tearing, then disable collision. And now the sphere will not collide. It will only activate the tearing, which is definitely something that you may want. Okay, now I'm starting over for the dynamic effect. So again, without fast cloth, go to dynamic and click apply. Go to pin and pin any vertices that you want to be static. Then go to draw tear line. And so in this dynamic version of the effect, just like with the simple tearing, we can draw lines where we want the cloth to tear. Then click finish. And again, you have your lines, but the cloth will look completely clean until the actual tearing starts happening. Here, let's test the mesh activator. So I'll create an object and click add mesh activator. Now Suzanne will collide with the object, and it will also activate the tearing. But personally, I found that if you want to have a mesh in the simulation, just keep the collision option. So I can go to physics and disable dynamic paint. And then you can have a dummy activator without collision for the tearing effect. This will give you the most control because the dummy or the empty is invisible. You could parent it to the mesh and then animate both together. But for example, at this point, if I want more tearing to happen based on this collision, I could animate the scale of the empty. And that gives me more precise control over the tearing. Very cool. Even though this is still the basic example, this is something that would be quite difficult to achieve without the add-on. And something else I wanted to point out is that the activator will affect the pinned vertices the same way it affects the cuts. So you can completely disconnect a piece of cloth and make it fall off. If you're enjoying this in-depth review and tutorial, please like and subscribe because I make a lot of these types of videos. Now for the first advanced example, we have a character swinging a sword and the sword will go through this cloth. So we want to make it look like the sword is cutting the cloth. To get started, I'm going to turn this into a cloth, and I'm repeating myself, but do not use fast cloth. That is only for the simple cutting that we covered at the beginning. Here, I want to use dynamic cutting. So I'm going to switch to dynamic, select this cloth, and I want to subdivide it. And here's another gotcha. I'll go to edit mode, and I'll just select some polygons, and then use this subdivide button. And you'll see that it only subdivides the selection. So it's not super intuitive, but if you want to subdivide the whole mesh, then select everything in edit mode and then click this subdivide button. Next, I'm going to click the apply button to make this dynamic cloth with tearing. Now it will fall on the ground. So I want to pin some vertices. I'm going to select the top row and pin it. Okay, now I want to design my cut. And so I have to go through the animation and see the path of this sword. Now, because it's a very fast movement, it only takes a couple of frames. So we can go to playback and enable subframes. And now I can play this animation much more smoother. And here is where it starts to interact with the cloth. So I'm going to create a new annotation and press D and indicate where the sword is. I can actually switch to annotation and surface so that I can draw directly on the surface. And then I'll keep going. And now if I draw, the previous line will disappear. So I'll lock this frame. So we get a trajectory like this. It doesn't have to be perfect, but now we have an approximation of the cut. Disable subframes. Go to simply add-on. Now I'll press draw tear line. I'll switch the preset to rough to get more interesting cuts. I'll enable adaptive polygons. That will give us more resolution where we do the cut. And then I'll use the line that I drew as a guide. I'll try to cut through the whole cloth and then give it some random cuts here and there to make it more interesting. And then I'll click finish. And this gives us this cut. To try to activate it, one of the simplest things we can do is to select the sword itself, which is a separate object, and make it a mesh activator. And I'll also enable collision. And then let's see what happens. So you can see that we get a little bit of a cut, but it is far from enough. So I'm going to undo. And I'm just going to leave a collision for this sword so that it collides with the cloth a little bit. Then I'll create a dummy activator and make sure that it doesn't have collision. I'll place it at the tip of the sword and make it smaller. And then I want to parent it to the sword. And I have to go to edit mode for the sword and select 3 vertices. We're going to create a special type of parenting. Now select the empty, shift select the sword, control P, and vertex triangle. Now the empty moves with the sword. And now it will be much easier to cut the cloth. We are already getting something, but it can be much better. So what I'm going to do is actually animate this empty. I'm going to insert a keyframe. Actually, on frame 16, I'll insert a keyframe. And then in here, I'm going to scale it up and move it a little bit. I have auto keying enabled. And then I'm going to animate it on each frame so that I get as much of the cut as possible. Let's see what we got now. Yep, awesome. I didn't want to unpin the top vertices, so I need to move it away on this keyframe so that it doesn't affect the cloth. Okay, so this is looking really cool. If you don't like it, you can keep tweaking it. You can keep tweaking the animation of the dummy. You can add more dummies. Now here, something I see is that at the end, the cloth goes over the character and it doesn't collide with it. And I could make the character collider, but that could be hard to control. So I'm going to create another dummy activator and remove the dynamic paint. I just want a collision. I can place it at the knee of the character or the leg, and then I can parent it to this bone. And now the empty will move with the character. Oops, it had to be on the other leg. So let's parent it to this leg. And let's try to play again. Okay, and now this empty will prevent the cloth from interacting with the character too much. I can make it smaller. Okay, this is looking very cool. Our cloth tearing is set up and it looks great in the viewport, but if we actually render this image, we'll get a little surprise. So I've set up a camera and some lights. And I'm going to go to render image, and you'll see that I can't really see the cut and there are these big spheres. In my opinion, this is an oversight in the add-on, but it is very easy to fix. First of all, these so-called dummies that we used are not the same as Blender empties. They look like that, but actually they're meshes, which we can see if we go to render view. And so I have to select each of these meshes, and I can go to the outliner and press delete on the numpad, and that will highlight the object, and I just need to disable it in rendering. And here's my second dummy. I'll do the same. And then there is a second cloth object. So select your main cloth object. In the outliner, expand the hierarchy, and you will find an object called something_org. So disable rendering for it as well. And that's it. Now I can render the image, and it will render exactly as it should. And also, before you render your animation, I would highly recommend that you select your cloth, go to physics, and find the cache settings and bake all dynamics. This way there won't be any surprises during rendering. This is another example that I wanted to show, but really the setup is mostly the same. So here the only thing that I want to point out is that I wanted this object here, the sphere, to be a rigid body. And when I had it as a rigid body, it didn't work for some reason. I'm still not sure why. So what I had to do is to first determine the behavior of the rigid body, and then go to Object, Rigid Body, and Bake to Keyframes. Once it is baked to keyframes, it becomes a normal object, and the whole setup works easily. So here's the whole setup. I have the mesh, which will collide with the cloth. And I have a dummy, which activates the tearing. So we have the object falling, the dummy follows it, and then it expands in size so that it can unpin all of these pinned vertices here, and these parts of the cloth can move freely. Overall, this is a great add-on which simplifies a very difficult simulation effect. You'll find a link to the add-on in the description box, and if you buy it during the sale right now, you'll get a discount.